Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be talking about the Feraligatr deck. I've talked about this deck some on the channel, actually a decent amount, but I wanted to make another video on it. Honestly, part of it is because I keep seeing people playing Feraligatr, and they keep making like mistakes with it. I'm not the best player by any means, but I've played this deck a bunch, and I've seen a lot of people play the deck as well. And it's a really interesting deck with a lot of nuances that are there's a lot of things that are complicated that like change depending on how the game is going, and there are things that are simpler as well that you also need to like understand to be able to play the deck, because every deck obviously like just say Dragapult, right? Obviously the idea is to go ahead and evolve into your Dragapult EX and take a bunch of knockouts and do a bunch of damage, and you can use Dusknoir to take knockouts and do damage and eliminate your opponent's Pokemon faster, and then you can use Dragalope to draw cards and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. It's obviously Dragapult first, and there's the other stuff to support Dragapult. But it's not that simple with Feraligatr. Feraligatr is a deck that has, again, a lot of things going on with it. Feraligatr itself, I'll introduce the card though. Its ability says, once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, attacks used by this Pokemon do 120 more damage to your opponent's active. It's attacks used by this Pokemon, so you have the attack Giant Wave here, which does 160 for 2 waters, and then it cannot use Giant Wave next turn, but it can use other attacks, and there are other attacks to be used by this Pokemon as well. So this Pokemon has, the deck plays the Pokemon of Relicanth, which is pretty important to how this deck actually functions. You have 2 previous evolutions, obviously, or stage 2. You have the Croconaw. Croconaw has its attack for 1 water, which does 30. Again, Relicanth just exactly lets you copy the attack. You just need the 1 water. So this is a cheaper attack. Then you have the Totodile, which also can attack for 1 water, and it does 10. And then it also says that during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon cannot retreat. Both of these attacks are important, and I would say they're pretty equally important, personally. And Relicanth is a Pokemon you want out. It's not a Pokemon, so this list plays 1 copy. The reason why this deck, I think, is it was like moderately popular, but then it won a major tournament in Japan. I believe it's one of the biggest tournaments of this year, but it might be the biggest. Anyways, it was a really big one. It was the first, I think, like considered the first major one post rotation, and so it was like really popular. And I'm going to talk about this list as well some, but it plays, and this is not a list I played. I think I played this with this list a few times. It plays Milotic EX, which is interesting. I'll quickly talk about Milotic EX, but Milotic EX here has its ability making it immune from damage from Terra Pokemon, and then it does 160 for water, colorless, and puts your opponent's active to sleep. And then, which the attack obviously isn't super good, but it could be worse, right? It's not terrible, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, it's not very strong either. Then Feebas here does 10 for each damage counter on this Pokemon, which is kind of cool. You can copy it using Relicanth. I don't know how much that is a part of the deck. I mean, if it's there, you can use it, and it's a nice little option, and it's kind of hard to get the 3 energies on Milotic EX for Hypno Splash. Putting your opponent's active to sleep can be really good, to be honest. Don't sleep on, no pun intended, don't sleep on that. It is actually... It can be really disruptive, right? Sleep, if you don't know, your opponent, I believe they turn right. No, they turn left because the L and sleep. Anyway, so that doesn't happen live though, but then they flip a coin between turns, and if tails, they're still asleep, and they keep doing that until they wake up. And then if they're asleep, they cannot attack, and they also cannot retreat, though they can play switch cards, they can evolve, they can do things like that. But anyways, and then if they do that, they will be not asleep. But anyways, it's okay. It's not amazing. I mean, it's a coin flip, so there's a 50% chance it won't like do anything, and then they might have switch outs, so it also won't do anything. But anyways, it's, do keep that in mind if you are playing with that. However, Milotic EX, again, it only counters Terra Pokemon. The other Pokemon that is a walling Pokemon that is immune to damage from certain types of Pokemon is Mimikyu, which is immune to damage from all Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. It has an attack 70 for Psychic Colress, and it does 70 in the form of damage counters here. And then the important thing about there's a bunch of important things, but Mimikyu's ability is objectively better than Milotic EX's ability, ignoring everything else about the cards, because it just walls a lot more Pokemon, and Milotic EX is mainly there to counter Dragapult EX, I think. Dragapult EX was the most played deck in Japan by a margin, and it was like a quarter of the metagame, which is crazy. It's not a quarter of the metagame internationally though, so Milotic EX is counter meta card. The whole deck is semi countery, but it's not just a counter. I mean, Feraligator's strong, but Milotic EX is pretty countery. A lot of people are dropping Milotic EX. I have, and that's what I would recommend. So I'd recommend just not playing that card. It does counter Terrabox, I guess, but Terrabox does play, for example, Lily's Clefairy EX, and it also plays, of course, Massive Ogre EX, which will just beat it, I think. I mean, I guess it'll be put to sleep, but Milotic EX doesn't actually hit through Corso Massive Ogre EX, and Corso Massive Ogre EX does hit through Milotic EX, so you might be able to slow him down a little, but you will not stop him, and so keep those things in mind. It's not like, I mean, it's called Terrabox, but you're not completely beating it, and then it stops Charizard EX. Charizard EX is like played some. It's certainly fine. And Flareon, I guess, as well is played apparently about as much as Charizard, which is kind of crazy to me. I feel like I've barely seen that deck. But anyways, it's like twice as much. But anyways, some things, but it's not as big of a deal as it was when it was played, so I just cut it. And I've seen a lot of people like using it and kind of really playing it as a main attacker. Milotic EX just isn't super good right now in general. But then moving on to the really like the meat and bones of the deck, the Feraligator line, you have the ability, so you actually have 6 different attacks you can use with Feraligator essentially. You can do 160 for 2. You can do I'm just going to assume you have Relicanth. Getting Relicanth onto the board is not that hard, and your opponent is probably not targeting the Relicanth either. I will say, so I'm going to move on from this list, actually. I'll make a few comments on cards that are here for Milotic EX. I guess Crispin is really good for Milotic EX. It's okay in other situations. It's kind of nice with Munkidori. This list also plays 3 Munkidori. This list also does. I think a lot of lists do. I don't. I'll say this is my list. This one plays... I've talked about this list some, and I'll eventually move to it a little more, but I don't think Munkidori is as important as other people kind of imply based on the counts of cards in the deck. But anyways, this deck also plays essentially 5. It plays 3 Basic Darkness, 2 Luminous, and then 4 Waters. So I'll talk about my energy count at some point. But anyways, it also plays Precious Trolley, but it only plays 1 Relicanth and 1 Mimikyu. I definitely cut my Milotic EX, definitely add a second Mimikyu. It does play Badoo. I personally am not a big Badoo fan, really in all meanings of that, including I don't play Badoo that much. I play it some, but I don't have it in the deck. You could definitely have it in your deck. It slows your opponent down, but it's also vulnerable, and I mean it's a good card. You can play it in your deck. That's certainly fine, but I just don't have it in. But mostly, I guess, due to deck space reasons. But this list plays Precious Trolley. This list does not. This one plays Prime Catcher. This is one that was like played in some online tournament. It's a bit newer, so there are some changes to it. But again, you still have, this one plays 2 Relicanth. So again, I'm assuming you have Relicanth that plays 3 Artazon. So you can get Relicanth into play with relative ease, and then you have the Feraligator, and I'm assuming it's not being rare candied. My list does play 1 rare candy, but I'll just assume it's not. So you have 160 for 2, you have 280 for 2, but you do damage yourself, and those are both Giant Wave, which you cannot use back to back. You have 30 for 1 and switch to the bench. You have 150 for 1 and switch to the bench and damage yourself. But the damage yourself, that matters some, but it's not the biggest deal. But then you have Totodile 10 for 1, or 130 for 1, and you do damage yourself again. And you don't switch to the bench for the first attack. So there are times when you don't want to switch to the bench. If you switch to their bench, then you send something else up. This list does play Rescue Board. The idea, I think, is to rescue board. Well, it can be used in different situations, right? But it can be used to rescue board the Mimikyu. So you send up the Mimikyu, and then your opponent either, they might not knock out the Mimikyu. You don't want them to knock out the Mimikyu. So let's assume that they don't, and then you can rescue board retreat back into the Feraligator. We have that wall in between. However, Luxurious Cape is really there also for the Mimikyu, so then you're not Luxurious Caping your Mimikyu. That's why I don't really love rescue board. I've seen lists play Beach Core, but that feels pretty clunky to me, so I haven't done that, but that is a consideration. Obviously, the biggest attack is 280. It is 2 energies, but let's just say you have 2. That's often your best option. There are times you get behind in the game, if you get behind early in the game, you can't just Giant Wave all the time. You'll probably lose at that point. It depends how much you're behind. If you're just behind a tiny bit by like a prize and your opponent's like set up okay, but they're not doing anything insane. Maybe there's like swinging with the Gold Engo EXs over and over again or something, then you can just Giant Wave every turn. If you can do that, that's certainly fine. And you'll win eventually. But that won't work against everything. If your opponent's, playing Dragapult and they're like destroying your entire bench every turn, or not your entire bench, but like doing substantial bench damage consistently, and you're not even one-shotting them using Giant Wave, then that's not amazing, and you're committing extra energy as well. The deck has energy issues. Crispin does get you an extra energy. This list here, which again is like a lot of lists that people are playing, Crispin's hard to find. It plays Pokegear, which can help you get it, but you're not always going to get it when you need it, and you do need other supporters to actually get your deck going. It doesn't play any other engine. No Fezandipti EX, no anything like that. So Crispin can get the energy on, but Giant Wave is an extra energy, which is a pretty big deal. So you can just attack with Big Bite and do 130. That's okay. You can do 150 with Croconaw, switch to the bench. If you switch to the bench, your opponent can still target your Feraligatr by bringing it back into the active. And if you're attacking with Feraligatr over and over again and using your Torrential Heart ability, at that point, you're going to potentially eventually knock yourself out. Now, at this point, I will mention Luxurious Cape. Luxurious Cape on Feraligatr is pretty bad. There are technically situations to use it. Luxurious Cape, I'll actually read out what it does, which does matter. So it says if the Pokemon this card's attached to that doesn't have a rule box, which are all your Pokemon, then it gets 100 more HP. And if it's knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, that player takes one more prize card. The thing that I want to focus in, obviously essentially you turn yourself into a true prizer with 100 extra HP. But only if you're knocked out by damage from your opponent's attack. If you knock yourself out with your Feraligatr's ability, that won't happen. There are times to do that. Additionally, if you're, though not that common, so don't aim for that, but that is the thing I'd mention here. But on top of that, if your opponent knocks you out using Dragapult EX's bench damage or damage counters, I should specify, or using Munkidori or Dusknoir, they will not get the two prizes. That is a really big deal. Keep that in mind. Feraligatr isn't that tanky. 180 is it's nothing special, right? But then going up to 280, that's pretty nice, except you're not actually at 280 because you're probably going to be at less because you're going to be damaging yourself. Yes, there is a Munkidori to heal, but you already have issues getting the energy on Feraligatrs. You're not going to have all these extra energies on Munkidori. That's my big reason of why I don't love Munkidori. It does extra damage and it does healing, and those are both relevant in the deck. But you're not going to have all these extra energy attachments. I'll show you my list here. It plays EXP share. It plays reversal energy as well. So there's ways to get extra energies on. It doesn't actually play Pokegear. I play more supporters. I'm not a big fan of Pokegear. You could certainly drop some supporters and stuff for Pokegear though. And then go ahead and you're probably just gonna ignore the Crispin and be okay in that situation. Crispin is also an energy search, but I do play Colress's Tenacity. That's the way I built it. But with Feraligatr, you want to again, if you're using Giant Wave, you do need to get the energy on. You need to think about that. You're probably not using Munkidori if you're using Giant Wave all the time. And is 280 enough? It's not always enough. Then you have the hit and run strategy on the stage 1. This one is definitely something that is, I think it's what people have talked about as the main focus, but there are some things to talk about with it. As I said, if you just then you can go back and forth between the Croconaw attack reverse thrust, which you can do without Feraligatr and Relicanth, but then you're only doing 30, so that's much worse. And then the dream setup would be then that you're using Torrential Heart, damaging yourself, using Munkidori to also damage your opponent, and just pile on a ton of damage and be invincible with Mimikyu, because you just have the Mimikyu in the active, and then you're in a really good position where all of a sudden your opponent's not going to be able to do any damage, and they're taking all this damage. I will say, if they're not able to damage your Mimikyu, then it doesn't matter what you do. You could do 5,000 damage every turn, or you could do 50, and it's more or less fine either way. Obviously, it's better to do more damage, and 50 isn't enough, isn't a ton. It's actually, I'll say 70 for that's how much Mimikyu does, but that's okay. And you can be healing with Munkidori, and you'll be buying some time, so you probably can get the energy on Munkidori at that point. Feraligatr, yes, it does a bunch more damage, but it requires a lot more combo pieces. It requires a stage 2, which hasn't been rare candied, different basic on the bench, energy on the Feraligatr, and then you need the idea is to get 2 more Munkidoris and 2 Darkness energies on the board, and then also be switching using Rescue Board in your Mimikyu. So you're weakening the wall, which is the focal point of the strategy. It's okay. This is a route you can go down if you're able to do it and it's really strong, but you don't necessarily need to do all that to win. In fact, you don't need to do all that to win. You can just kind of hide behind Mimikyu, and you want the Luxurious Cape on the Mimikyu. That's because Pokemon that are knocking out, that are like targeting Mimikyu, the main two that I always reference are Dracoloak and Fan Rotom. They each do exactly 70, which is really nice for Mimikyu. Oh, no, it's really bad. It's really good against Mimikyu, but that means that if you Luxurious Cape, then you will be able to survive 2 hits, which is nice, and people aren't really playing tool counters. So you want to do that. That is arguably the most important thing in the deck, is to get a Luxurious Cape Mimikyu. Lots of decks can't deal with it. If your opponent is playing a single price deck, by the way, don't do that, obviously. Mimikyu's not a particularly good attacker. It could be worse, but it's not very good. It is able to not deal with Dracoloaks and Fan Rotoms if you have Luxurious Cape and you're just attacking. And with Munkidori, you're really easily able to deal with them. But still, if you're up against like a single prize deck, like let's just say the Roaring Moon Ancient Box deck, then Mimikyu's terrible. Your opponent's just gonna knock you out and take 2 prizes, and you're just giving your opponent extra prizes to take, which is terrible. Don't do that. But in most matchups, pretty much every matchup in the game that you'll be in, you want to Luxurious Cape your Mimikyu, and probably not Luxurious Cape anything else. Most decks have a good amount of gust, so they'll be able to gust up whatever you Luxurious Cape. And the whole, like, it doesn't play Pheasantipity EX. That's how much it wants to avoid playing 2 prizers. So don't give your opponent extra 2 prizers. That's just really bad. So Luxurious Cape on Feraligatr can be used, but in very niche circumstances. You need to think, like, my opponent's never knocking me out. And I'm going to be able to attack and get like an extra 200 damage on the board through this Luxurious Cape, because I'll survive an extra turn, and I can build up energy and get myself in a better board state. Not just, oh, I can, be around potentially an extra turn if things go the right way. No, you need to play, if you're doing that on anything else, you need to have a really good reason to do so, but there can be that occasionally. Then Totodile is the third part of it. I'll say Croconaw's like fine. I've kind of said Croconaw, like it kind of sounded like I said Croconaw's really bad. It's an important part of the deck, but Totodile is also important. This one does 10, does not switch to the bench, and it does stop him from retreating. That can be really good. It can be really good if you're just doing 10 and stopping him from retreating, or if you're doing 130 and stopping him from retreating as well. You can gust up Pheasantipity EX. That's what I like to do. There are a lot of decks that play Latias EX and Pheasantipity EX, though they do often play like one switch card, like a Professor Turtle scenario, and that's kind of risky, but it's a route you need to go down. You often find yourself falling behind a little bit in the early game. Sorry if there's any background noise as well. Especially, I'll talk about the consistency of the deck in just a moment, but Totodile here is a Pokemon that, and it can attack on its own and just do Big Bite, which is okay, though it's a little bit niche, because it has like way less HP and you don't have any versatility there, but that is an option. And you want to counter catch as well. That's why I place counter catcher. You can kind of gustall something. You can gustall something forever, or you can just gustall. And with the Pheasantipity example, you just 2-shot it in that situation, and you're pretty safe. Your opponent needs to then find the gust or the switch out that turn, and so that puts more pressure. And they can't even use Pheasantipity EX's ability either, so that's really nice on that turn in which you've trapped it there, because you're not taking a knockout. And then I'll also mention Luxurious Cape and Munkidori, or no, and Pheasantipity EX don't have the same wording. So if you take a knockout with Munkidori, they can still use Pheasantipity EX. That probably doesn't matter, but it could in the game. But you want to, look for those trapping options and look for, the different defensive options using Mimikyu and Totodile. They are really important to the deck. It's a Feraligatr deck, but you have lots of Pokemon that aren't Feraligatr. I'll show my list now. And this is the last thing that I think people need to understand about the deck. There are all these options that you can do. You don't always have access to most of those options, to be honest. The deck is really inconsistent, in my opinion. Some lists play Precious Trolley. This one plays Prime Catcher. I mean, Prime Catcher is obviously a very good card. I would not play Prime Catcher. I don't think the switch is that good, and I think you often have access to Counter Catcher anyways, so I think it's just kind of bad, to be honest, in the deck. I don't like Precious Trolley. If you know me, you know I don't like Precious Trolley. But I think Grand Tree is a really good inclusion in the deck. It's almost like a build-around, to be honest. I do play a Rare Candy and an Ultra Ball. This list plays one Ultra Ball. It doesn't play Rare Candy at all. It plays Team Evolution. I play one Team Evolution. Team Evolution is good. Tobin going second, but you need to have Team Evolution, and then you obviously want a Team Evolution 2 Pokemon. That's what it does. You could technically do it for one, and that feels pretty bad. So you need two Totodiles on your bench, and if you have one in the active, then you can't Team Evolution that one. So then that's like a little bit awkward. The ideal situation is to get Mimikyu, attach an energy to it, and Team Evolution. Also, I'll say this list plays two Luminous. I guess my deck can attack with Mimikyu essentially just as easily. I play Psychic. You can actually attack with Mind Bend. I've done that a few times. It's not very good, but it is an option. I do like the Psychic. I think Luminous is okay, but I have less Darkness Energies. I'm using less Munkidoris. You can run out of bench space some, so I think like getting two Munkidoris, I mean, can happen. It's nice to do, but the likelihood that you have the bench space and the setup to do it, I think, is pretty low. So I've not ever missed the two Munkidoris or the third Munkidori or the third Darkness Energy. Maybe the Darkness because it's hard to find, but I haven't had that big of an issue with it. Especially because I play Colress Tenacity, which is, as I said, for the Grand Tree. It's a bit of a weird dynamic, but Grand Tree and Artazon are both like good stadiums, and so Grand Tree is the way to get your stage 2 into play, assuming you're not Rare Candy and not Team Evolutioning. Team Evolution has just felt surprisingly inconsistent, not because I haven't had the Team Evolution. I've been able to get that. I also often have the turn 1 Arven, but I don't have any energy, and I don't have two Totodiles on my bench, so I need to get either the Earthen Vessel or the Buddy-Buddy Poffin, but I need both of those, and so it just kind of ends up being awkward. So I'll mention that if anyone's wondering, like, is one Team Evolution enough? Yeah, I think it's enough. I think, it's inconsistent though. So do keep that in mind. And you want to kind of, by time in the early game, using, again, Big Bite or Mimikyu. It can be your win condition, or it can also be your way to set up, or both. And then Precious Trolley is like okay. Relying on Team Evolution is kind of sketchy because once your opponent, like Team Evolution is like a turn 1 thing. Grand Tree, you can use it at any point, and so that's like better, I think. It's a little weird because you're searching for it using Colossus Tenacity. That's not really developing your board state. It's just a bit of a weird dynamic, but I think it's fine. I'll also mention Reversal Energy is really awesome in the deck. Obviously, it's way better with Colossus Tenacity because it's searchable, but I think that's still really worthwhile playing. It has some, again, really weird dynamics with it, but it allows you to use Giant Wave in one turn, which is really nice, and you can attach it on something else to retreat or whatever. That's okay. And so I really like that card in the deck, because again, it allows you to use the burst Giant Wave onto the board, and same thing with EXP share that allows you to use Giant Wave easier. Giant Wave is really nice. It also allows you to use pretty much anything easier, like Mimikyu's or even reverse thrust or Big Bites. You don't always have the energy in hand, or you want it on Munkidori, but it's mostly there for Giant Wave. Giant Wave just does a lot of damage. It's a single riser that does 280 damage. That's really good. If you can do that, if you can just do that a bunch of times, or if you can just eliminate one of your opponent's big threats. By doing that, that's 100% worth it. Well, it's usually worth it. So I'd definitely recommend that card in it, and definitely recommend EXP share. I think it's way better than Rescue was okay, but it's a little niche. And so I definitely include that in. It's just such a good inclusion. Assuming you're playing 4 Arvens, which I think all the lists I've seen have played it. Also, a lot of lists play like a bunch of Lana's Aid. Lana's Aid's pretty mediocre in the deck, to be honest. I do play Night Stretcher. This list also plays a Night Stretcher, but that support, in my opinion, is pretty mediocre. Pokemon Recovery is like fine, but no one else ever plays Lana's Aid in like any other deck, essentially. People have played it a little in Goldango, but yeah, I've mostly seen it in Feraligatr. These are like decks that aren't out yet. But yeah, Lana's Aid's not a super strong card. It's okay, and it has some use cases, but I figured I'd mention that. And then I play... I think those are like the main differences. Rare Candy, obviously, I don't think there's too much to explain here. Rare Candy is really good, and you can search it out. But it does stop you from using Reverse Thrust, so it's not like an all-the-time card, but it can bail you out of bad situations. Feraligatr is the name of the deck, and it's a good card to have in play. It's a card you really want. And again, if your opponent is like... after like early turns, if you don't have Croconaws in play, which you won't always have Croconaws, things might go awry, then you need to use Rare Candy or Grand Tree to escape those scenarios. But overall, the deck is really interesting. I wanted to talk about a lot of the different things that could happen, the ideas, and why my deck is the way it is, and why I'd recommend you try it out, actually. I like this list. There are definitely tweaks you can make. Tell me down below in the comments if there are tweaks that you'd make to this deck. Cards you remove and, of course, cards you add as well. But overall, I have like the feel. Oh, it was 4 research, which I think is fun. I think 4 research is fine, but anyways, that is a good card. It's just a good card. Nothing to overthink there. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as Ozmi said, see you in the next video.